Time is not what it seems. Beneath the ticking of clocks and the turning of calendars lies a current, a hidden river that has been flowing since the dawn of creation. It carries with it patterns older than the stars, rhythms that breathe civilizations into being, and just as easily draw the curtain on their final act. This is the language of the ages, a code written in the movement of planets, in the dance of equinoxes, in the slow turning of the great cosmic wheel. For thousands of years, mystics, astronomers, and keepers of ancient wisdom guarded this knowledge, knowing that to understand it was to hold the keys to prophecy itself. And then it was buried, suppressed, forgotten by most, but not lost. Because every so often, when humanity reaches a turning point, the code awakens, whispering its truth to those who are ready to see beyond the illusion of linear time and remember the map that was always there. Before there were clocks, before calendars, before the ticking of seconds became the heartbeat of our lives, there was another way to know time. It was not counted in hours, but in patterns, not written in numbers, but in symbols. The ancients did not see time as a straight line that began and ended. They saw it as a living language, a language that spoke in the slow sweep of the stars across the night sky, in the rise and fall of great civilizations, in the pulse of creation itself. Every sunrise, every equinox, every turn of the heavens was not just an event. It was a word, a syllable, part of a story written on a scale so vast you could only read it if you looked beyond a single lifetime. To the Mayans, it was the long count calendar, cycles of creation and renewal, stretching over thousands of years. To the Vedic sages of India, it was the yugas, cosmic ages where humanity would rise into golden wisdom, then sink into shadow before rising again. Even in the West, the Greeks spoke of the Great Year, a 26,000-year cycle born from the Earth's slow wobble, known today as the precession of the equinoxes. In this hidden language, each word was an age. Each age carried its own tone, its own energy, its own lesson for the human spirit. Like chapters in an epic saga, they guided the evolution of consciousness. But as our world grew louder, more distracted, we forgot how to listen. The sacred clock in the sky kept turning, yet most no longer knew it existed. Still, fragments of the language survived, carved into stone temples aligned perfectly with solstices and star risings, woven into myths of gods and heroes whose battles mirrored the movement of planets, etched into the very architecture of sacred sites, from the Sphinx facing the rising sun in Leo's time to Stonehenge marking the summer solstice. The ancients weren't just building monuments, they were writing sentences in the language of time. And here's the truth, this language is not dead. It has been sleeping, waiting for those who remember how to read it. You felt it in the déjà vu that makes no sense, in the patterns that repeat across history, in the strange way certain moments feel destined. That is the language whispering to you, reminding you that you are not adrift in chaos. You are inside a design. The ancients believed that when enough people learned to read time again, the ages themselves would open, that we would step into a new chapter not blindly, but with eyes wide open. That is the invitation now, to see the sky as a book, to see your life as a sentence in it, and to realize you were never just living in time. Time has been speaking to you all along. They say the stars are silent, but to the ancients, they were a voice speaking in patterns, cycles, and signs so precise they could predict the rise and fall of empires. across deserts, jungles, and oceans, civilizations who never met still carried the same obsession: to map the heavens and carve that map into stone, as if knowing the sky was the only way to truly know the earth. In Egypt, the Great Pyramid's shafts align not randomly, but toward the stars of Orion's belt and the pole star of the time. To modern eyes, it's architecture. To them, it was a clock, one that marked not hours, but ages. The Sphinx, weathered far beyond its supposed age, stares eternally east toward the rising sun on the spring equinox, locking its gaze into the precessional cycle of roughly 26,000 years. This was not just art or religion, it was astronomy on a scale that defies our textbooks. In the jungles of Mesoamerica, the Maya etched the long count calendar into stone, a calendar not for harvest seasons, but for cosmic seasons. They tracked the movement of the Pleiades, the crossing of Venus, and the slow wobble of Earth's axis, the same precession known to Egypt, and in their glyphs they told of worlds ending and beginning, each cycle bringing both destruction and rebirth. Far to the east, the builders of Angkor Wat in Cambodia designed their entire temple complex as a mirror of the heavens. Its towers and causeways align with solstices and equinoxes, its bas-reliefs depicting celestial calculations alongside myths of gods and demons. The precision is so exact that on the equinox, the sun rises directly over the central tower, as if the architecture itself were greeting the dawn of an age. These were not isolated bursts of genius. Göbekli Tepe, older than Stonehenge by thousands of years, holds carvings of animals and symbols that match constellations in the sky as they appeared around 10,000 BCE. This means the people who built it not only understood the heavens, they understood change in the heavens over deep time. Why would they care about such vast cycles when their own lives were so brief? Because they believed humanity was woven into those cycles, that the ages were not arbitrary spans of time, but living seasons of consciousness, each one carrying its own lessons, challenges, and transformations. To them, tracking the heavens was not about control. It was about alignment, a way to know when to plant, when to build, when to wage war, and when to awaken. The stone they carved was not meant to last for beauty alone. It was meant to outlast the memory of men, so that when the next age came, we would have a map, if we could still read the code. And perhaps, hidden in plain sight, those maps still wait for us to remember. Imagine the sky as a vast, slow-moving clock, not ticking in seconds or minutes, but in spans so long that civilizations can rise and fall before a single hour has passed. This clock is the Great Wheel, the precession of the equinoxes, an astronomical rhythm that quietly shapes the ages. Precession begins with the Earth itself. Our planet doesn't spin perfectly upright. Its axis tilts at about 23.5 degrees, and like a spinning top, that axis wobbles. One full wobble takes roughly 25,772 years. This motion is almost imperceptible in a human lifetime, but over centuries, it shifts the position of the equinox points, the spots where the sun crosses the celestial equator, against the backdrop of the stars. This means that the constellation rising with the sun on the spring equinox slowly changes, moving backward through the zodiac over millennia. The ancients noticed this. The builders of ancient observatories, from Nabta Playa in the Sahara to Stonehenge in Britain, aligned their monuments to the equinoxes and solstices. Over generations, they realized those alignments drifted. The star that rose in perfect harmony with the sun on an equinox would, centuries later, appear slightly off. This was no error in building. It was the sky itself shifting. To the Greeks, Hipparchus is credited with first recording precession around 130 BCE, comparing Babylonian star charts with his own measurements. But even earlier, the Vedic texts of India speak of vast yugas, cycles of time that echo the length of precessional ages. In Egypt, the priests of Heliopolis recorded star positions over lifetimes, and the temple alignments of Karnak bear silent witness to a changing sky. Each age, Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and so on, lasts about 2,160 years, a twelfth of the full cycle. These ages became the scaffolding for myths, prophecies, and spiritual calendars. The age of Taurus, marked by bull worship in Egypt and Mesopotamia. The age of Aries, heralded by the ram symbolism in Persia and the Hebrew shofar. The age of Pisces, the fish, a symbol at the heart of early Christianity. And now we stand at the threshold of Aquarius, the water-bearer, said to pour knowledge and awakening into the collective. For the ancients, precession wasn't an abstract curiosity. It was a cosmic metronome. Each shift into a new age was believed to bring a change in human consciousness, in the tone of civilization itself. Wars, renaissances, religious revolutions, all were seen as part of this great turning. Yet in the modern world, this mechanism has slipped from common memory, relegated to astronomy textbooks, and dismissed as irrelevant. But if time truly has a language, precession is its grammar, the structure that shapes the meaning of the ages. And as we watch the slow hand of the great wheel sweep from Pisces into Aquarius, the question isn't whether the shift is happening. The question is, are we listening? Think of time not as a straight road, but as a garden, one that passes through seasons far grander than spring and winter. These are the ages, each carrying its own frequency, its own divine curriculum for the soul. Just as the earth cycles through warmth and cold, the cosmos breathes through patterns of energy, shaping the tone of human consciousness over millennia. In the age of Taurus, humanity's roots sank deep into the earth. Agriculture flourished, temples honored the bull as a living symbol of strength and fertility. The lesson was stability, learning to plant, to build, to claim dominion over the land. This was a season of grounding, of establishing the foundations of civilization itself. Then came Aries, the ram, the spark of the warrior spirit. Here, the human story shifted toward conquest, individual will, and the forging of new empires. The soul's lesson was courage, initiative, and the sometimes harsh discipline of self-mastery. Nations rose and fell under the banner of fire and steel, and humanity learned the price of ambition. Pisces followed, the fish swimming in opposite directions, mirroring the paradoxes of faith. It was a season of surrender, devotion, and the unseen. The lesson was compassion, but also discernment, for illusion swam alongside truth. Religions spread across continents, promising salvation, but sometimes shrouding deeper knowledge beneath ritual and hierarchy. Pisces brought the world both mystics and martyrs, prophets and dogmas. And now, Aquarius rises. The water-bearer pours out not water, but knowledge, truth, and innovation. Its lesson is awakening, a call to see beyond the boundaries of nation, creed, and even species. Aquarius asks us to remember that we are one body, one mind, one pulse of life. But with this vision comes responsibility, the need to wield knowledge with wisdom, to ensure technology serves life rather than enslaves it. Each age is not better than the last. They are chapters, and each carries the frequency needed for the growth of the soul at that moment in the human story. The shift from one age to another is not abrupt, but a blending of energies as one spiritual season fades and another begins to bloom. In this overlap, old patterns fight to remain, while new ones push to be born. The ancient Maya, the Vedic sages, the Egyptian priests, they all understood that these seasons were part of a larger divine design, a cosmic syllabus, if you will. And just as a student cannot skip a grade, humanity cannot leap ahead to an age it has not yet prepared for. The purpose is not to rush the cycle, but to master the lesson of each phase. Because when you understand the ages as spiritual seasons, you realize time itself is the teacher, and we, every soul alive, are both the students and the seeds, growing toward a harvest we may not yet fully see. Imagine for a moment that nothing in history was random, that every age, every rise and fall of empires, every awakening of the human spirit was part of a design so vast it could only be called divine. This is the cosmic blueprint, the idea that before the first star ever flared into being, the cycles of time were drawn into the fabric of the universe like sacred architecture. The ancients saw the sky as a living manuscript, its constellations the letters of a language older than speech. The great ages were not accidents of astronomy, but milestones, coordinates in a grand syllabus set by the Creator itself. The movement of the equinoxes, the tilt of the Earth, the slow dance of our solar system through the galaxy. All of it was woven into a clock, not to measure hours, but to guide souls. The Vedic texts speak of the yugas, vast epochs that shaped the spiritual and moral state of humanity. The Maya carved the long count into stone, tracking not just years, but the breaths of the cosmos. Egyptian priests aligned temples to the heliacal rising of Sirius, timing rituals to moments when the veil between realms was thinnest. These were not superstitions, they were acknowledgements of the blueprint, a recognition that our story is not improvised, but orchestrated, a score written across millennia, waiting for each soul to play its part. If you could step outside of time, you would see it. A spiral, not a line. Each age distinct in frequency, yet perfectly placed within the whole. Taurus grounding the roots of civilization. Aries igniting the fires of conquest. Pisces dissolving into the waters of faith and illusion. Aquarius pouring out the awakening light. Not one out of place. Not one without purpose. In this view, your life is not an accident of birth in a random century. It is the result of a cosmic appointment, a deliberate placing of your soul in the exact age whose lessons you are meant to meet. And while the blueprint spans thousands of years, its power reaches into the smallest details. The era you are born into, the challenges you face, even the way your heart responds to change. The hidden truth is that this design was known, but then concealed. Pieces of it buried in temples, burned in libraries, dismissed as myth. Why? Because a humanity that remembers it is a humanity that cannot be controlled. When you know the blueprint, you no longer mistake the chaos of the present for the absence of meaning. You begin to see the invisible scaffolding holding the world in place. And with that vision comes liberation. The ages are not drifting aimlessly through time. They are unfolding like petals in a flower that was planted before the dawn of creation. And you, here, now, are standing in the season chosen for you before you took your first breath. In the golden haze of a world long before written history, humanity looked to the sky and saw a single truth blazing above them. The sun was king. Its warmth gave life, its absence brought death, and in its steady rise and fall, they saw the pulse of the cosmos itself. This was the age of the lion, the age of Leo, when the sun's dominion was not just a matter of light and shadow, but of divine order. The people of that time understood something modern minds have largely forgotten, that the heavens were a mirror, and the placement of the sun in the great cosmic wheel was not random. It was a signal, a decree. Across the Nile, the savannas and the deserts, cultures flourished under the banner of solar kingship. In Egypt, the lion-headed goddess Sekhmet guarded the cosmic balance, both fierce and protective, embodying the sun's dual nature, life-giver and destroyer. The Great Sphinx, gazing eternally eastward, has been linked by some researchers, such as Robert Bovell and Graham Hancock, to alignments that would have occurred precisely during the age of Leo, around 10,500 BCE. The theory suggests that this stone guardian was more than a monument. It was a marker, a timestamp in the language of the stars. Civilizations understood that during Leo's reign, the energetic current of the planet was infused with solar fire. It was a time of vitality, courage, and royal authority. Kings did not just rule, they radiated. Their crowns and diadems mirrored the sun's corona, their thrones elevated to echo its central place in the heavens. In temples, gold leaf shimmered under open skylights so that the sun could strike the altar directly, bridging heaven and earth. But the sun's worship was not merely symbolic, it was functional. Ancient astronomer priests tracked its movement through solstice and equinox, aligning sacred architecture so precisely that sunlight would pierce inner sanctuaries only on key days. This was no mere agricultural calendar. It was a way to harmonize human life with the rhythms of the cosmos, to ensure that kingship, law, and spiritual practice flowed in resonance with the great celestial heartbeat. The age of the lion carried a lesson etched in both stone and sky, that leadership must be illuminated not by greed, but by the same life-giving force that sustains the world. Yet, like all ages, Leo's time passed, the wheel turned, the sun's power, once venerated with awe, became myth. Its temples fell to ruin, its codes buried beneath sand and shadow. Still, the echo of its radiance survives in the very symbols we use today. The crown, the halo, the lion as an emblem of strength. And if you listen closely, in the silence of dawn, you can almost hear it, the roar of the sun, reminding us that the blueprint of the ages was written not just in time, but in light. The age of the twins was a time when humanity's gaze turned inward toward the mind's capacity to connect, record, and exchange. The constellation of Gemini, with its mirrored stars Castor and Pollux, became a celestial emblem of duality, not only the twin nature of the human spirit, but the twin currents of knowledge and movement. It was here, in this great turning of the wheel, that language ceased to be just spoken breath and became something fixed, etched, and enduring. Before this age, memory was a fragile thread passed from elder to child, vulnerable to distortion, fading with each retelling. But as the energies of Gemini swept across the earth, a shift began. The symbols scratched into clay tablets in Sumer, the pictographs painted on the walls of the Nile, the ideograms of the Yellow River. These were more than marks. They were the birth of a new nervous system for humanity. Writing allowed ideas to leap across time, to survive the death of the speaker, to reach minds far beyond the horizon. Gemini's influence was mercurial, quicksilver in thought, agile in movement. Under this current, trade routes blossomed like veins across the continents. The Mediterranean became a meeting ground for merchants from Crete, Egypt, and the Levant. Mesopotamian caravans carried lapis from Afghanistan, cedar from Lebanon, and tin from Anatolia. Along with goods came stories, technologies, and gods. Each transformed in the exchange, each woven into the fabric of a growing collective identity. This age was also a time when the concept of the other began to shift. To trade meant to meet strangers, to weigh trust against need, to navigate not just seas and deserts, but the complexities of human intention. Diplomacy and deception became tools of survival, and language, now written as well as spoken, was both bridge and weapon. The twin pillars of communication and commerce stood as the great engines of progress. Ancient myths reflected this dual current. In Greece, Hermes, the fleet-footed messenger, ruled over both language and trade. In Egypt, Thoth was the keeper of the written word and the recorder of truth, a god whose pen was as mighty as any king's decree. The cosmic blueprint of the age of Gemini seemed to whisper that humanity's evolution was not just in the muscles of the body, but in the connections of the mind. And yet, like all ages, the twin season was not without shadow. The same skills that allowed merchants to strike agreements also birthed the art of manipulation. The same written word that preserved truth could be twisted to mask it. But such is the nature of duality. Every light carries its reflection. The age of Gemini planted seeds that would grow into civilizations of unparalleled complexity, leaving behind a legacy of words, trade, and the understanding that the path forward is always built in dialogue with the other. In the long sweep of the heavens, there was an era when the bull ruled not only the fields and pastures, but the altars and the skies, the age of Taurus, a season when the sun rose in the constellation of the bull during the spring equinox, was a time of earth, fertility, and the enduring power of form. Across the cradle of civilization, cultures looked to the bull as a living embodiment of strength, stability, and divine presence. Its body was not merely flesh, it was the vessel of cosmic force. In Egypt, the Apis bull was more than a sacred animal. It was the earthly incarnation of Ptah, the creator god, and later associated with Osiris, lord of the afterlife. Chosen by distinct markings, said to be decreed by the gods, the Apis was revered, fed in sanctuaries, and adorned with golden flowers. When it died, it was mummified with honors equal to a pharaoh, entombed in the Serapeum at Saqqara, as though to remind the people that divinity could walk and graze among them. Far to the east, in Mesopotamia, the bull rose again as a celestial guardian. The bull of heaven in Sumerian myth, unleashed by the goddess Inanna to punish King Gilgamesh, was more than a weapon. It was the force of the cosmos moving through animal form. The great Lamassu statues that flanked Assyrian palaces, with the body of a bull, the wings of an eagle, and the face of a god, were carved to guard thresholds between the human and the divine. Here, the bull was not just power, but protection, standing at the liminal space between worlds. The bull's image stamped itself into the economic and spiritual life of the time. Its horns, curving like the crescent moon, became symbols of lunar cycles and agricultural rhythms. Temples aligned with the Pleiades, a star cluster within Taurus, became seasonal markers, ensuring planting and harvest stayed in harmony with the heavens. To live under the age of Taurus was to live in sync with Earth's abundance, to see wealth in herds and harvests, and to revere the patient, unshakable force that sustains life. But the power of Taurus was not gentle. It demanded respect. The same horns that tilled the soil could gore an enemy. The same fertility that blessed the fields could, when provoked, unleash famine or flood. Ancient rites sometimes mirrored this duality, with festivals of renewal on one hand and blood sacrifices on the other. A reminder that creation and destruction are never far apart. When the wheel turned and the age of Taurus gave way to the age of Aries, the sacred bull did not vanish. It was transformed, absorbed into new myths and symbols, yet its imprint remained, in the stone of the temples, in the constellations above, and in the collective memory of humanity. For the bull had been more than a sign in the sky. It was the anchor of a world where strength, fertility, and divine order were one. When the great wheel turned once more, the bull stepped aside, and the ram took its place at the dawn of the equinox. The age of Aries had begun, an era defined by fire, steel, and the will to push forward no matter the cost. The sun's rising in Aries marked not just a shift in the heavens, but a shift in the soul of humanity. The symbols of fertility and stability gave way to those of movement, battle, and divine mandate. The ram's horns became the banner of kings and the crown of gods. In Egypt, the sacred ram was embodied in Amun, a god whose hidden power and creative force commanded reverence. His temples swelled with colossal avenues lined with ram-headed sphinxes, each one a guardian of the king's right to rule. Amun was not merely worshipped, he was invoked as the very breath behind the march of empires. To bear the ram's horns was to bear the seal of heaven's authority to lead, to conquer, and to protect. Farther east, in the Persian highlands, warrior kings rose under the ram's influence, uniting vast territories with armies that moved like storms. Across the Mediterranean, the Greek god Aries, from whom the constellation takes its name, embodied the unyielding force of war. Yet even here, war was never just about domination. It was framed as a crucible for the spirit. To enter the field of battle was to face not only one's enemies, but the self, to be tested in courage, discipline, and honor. This was the time when the great empires of history carved their names into stone and memory. The Assyrians, the Persians, the Macedonians under Alexander, all bore the signature of Aries in their relentless expansion. The ram's energy demanded movement, demanded initiative, demanded that humanity learn to wield power without being consumed by it. In this way, conquest became not merely a political act, but a spiritual trial. Could the warrior king rule with justice, or would he fall to the intoxication of force? Religions too bore the ram's mark. The Hebrew Bible speaks of the ram as the sacrificial stand-in for Isaac, a symbol of divine provision and the power of substitutionary offering. The Passover lamb too carries echoes of Aries, marking a covenant sealed in blood and liberation. These were not accidental parallels. They were threads in the same cosmic fabric, where the ram's fire was both a destroyer and a liberator. But the age of Aries also bore its warnings, for in the same way the ram charges forward without fear, so too can it drive headlong into destruction. Civilizations that rose in the fire of Aries often burned out in it as well. The test was always the same: to master the will, not be mastered by it. And as the skies prepared to turn again, the question lingered: had humanity learned the lesson of the ram, or would the next age inherit its untempered flame? When the celestial wheel turned to Pisces, the age of the fish began, a season when the tides of history swelled with faith, sacrifice, and the dream of a higher world. The constellation's two fish, swimming in opposite directions yet bound by a single thread, became the silent emblem of humanity's longing to bridge heaven and earth. The age of Aries' roar of conquest faded into the whisper of the soul. Empires no longer won their power solely through the sword. They sought it through belief. Pisces is ruled by Neptune in modern astrology, the planet of dreams, mysticism, and the dissolving of boundaries. Its energy does not build in stone but in spirit, weaving invisible networks of devotion and myth. Around 0 AD, a new symbol began to spread quietly through the Roman world. The ichthys, the fish, etched in secret by early followers of Jesus. To the oppressed, it was a promise of salvation. To the seeker, it was a map toward compassion and divine love. This was an age where the unseen became the most powerful currency. Religions rose and spread across continents, fueled not by visible power, but by the stories and symbols they carried. The compassion of the Buddha's teachings, the mystical visions of the Gnostics, the Sufi poets' songs of divine union, all found fertile ground in this age. The world began to speak in the language of parables and miracles, of surrender and grace. Yet Pisces carries a double current. One fish swims toward truth, the other toward illusion. Where faith uplifts, blind belief combined. The same devotion that inspires compassion can also be weaponized into dogma. In the shadow of the age of Pisces, empires and institutions learned to clothe power in robes of holiness. The cross that once symbolized sacrifice became a banner under which wars were fought. The gentle shepherd's call became, in some hands, a summons to convert or destroy. This duality is the great paradox of Pisces. The ocean it offers can be a place of baptism and renewal, or of drowning in deception. Those who navigated it wisely learned to see with the eyes of the heart, to anchor themselves not in the voice of authority, but in the quiet truth within. Those who did not risk being swept away by tides of mass belief, unable to tell the difference between the divine and the counterfeit. And yet, beneath both the light and shadow, the age of Pisces was always preparing the soul for something more. Its lesson was that the invisible realm is real, but must be tested. That love is the highest law, but discernment is its guardian. As the great wheel prepared to turn again, the question was left for the next age to answer. Could humanity keep the heart of Pisces without carrying its chains? The air is electric, though not with thunder. It hums with something subtler, an invisible current that moves through ideas, through networks, through the unspoken agreements between minds. This is the signature of the water-bearer, pouring not water, but the living stream of consciousness itself. The age of Aquarius does not arrive like a king on a throne. It arrives like a quiet storm, invisible at first, until you realize it has been changing everything around you. For thousands of years, power flowed downward from a single point, from monarchs, from priests, from hierarchies that demanded obedience. In the Aquarian current, that pyramid dissolves. The stream no longer flows from one to many, but from many to many. This is the age when truth itself becomes decentralized. Knowledge breaks its chains and escapes the vaults of temples and institutions. What once required permission to learn now lives in the hands of anyone with the will to search. But this flood of information is not gentle. It tests the soul as much as it liberates it. In ancient astrological traditions, Aquarius was not only the bringer of innovation, it was the bearer of disruption. The Babylonians saw it as a god pouring the waters of the heavens down upon the earth, sometimes to cleanse, sometimes to destroy. The Egyptians tied it to Hapi, the Nile's annual flood, a gift that could feed civilizations, but also sweep away their foundations. And so it is with this cycle. The wave of awakening brings connection, but also chaos. In the Aquarian frequency, lies and truth race neck and neck through the same wires. The same network that can awaken millions can also deceive millions. It is no longer enough to simply receive. You must discern. The soul lesson here is sovereignty. In this age, the measure of spiritual maturity is not how well you follow, but how clearly you can stand in your own center while still being part of the whole. The mystics of every tradition foresaw an era when humanity would function more like a single organism. Many voices, one mind. The Vedic seers spoke of Satya Yuga's return, when transparency would make deception impossible. The Mayan elders spoke of a time when humanity would remember it is part of the cosmic web, and the Hermeticists whispered of an age when the one mind would awaken in all minds simultaneously. We stand at the opening of that gate now. The water the bearer pours is not for the body, it is for the spirit. Drink deeply, and you will find yourself speaking the language of a new world. Refuse, and the flood will still reshape the land beneath your feet. In the age of Aquarius, you do not merely live through history, you become the architect of the history to come. If you look at history only as a list of wars, rulers, and inventions, you see fragments, moments without a thread. But if you step back far enough, patterns begin to emerge. The ages, one after another, unfold like the chapters of a vast hidden manuscript, a sacred story written not in ink, but in the movement of the heavens. Each age is a verse in a cosmic poem, each transition a turning of the page in the soul's great epic. In the age of Leo, the first lines were etched in golden sunlight. Humanity learned to stand in awe of the source of life itself, the sun, and to see divinity in the act of creation. In Gemini, the twin currents of language and trade began to weave connections across distance, teaching us that thought could travel faster than the body. In Taurus, we learned to root ourselves in the fertility of the earth, building temples to stability, abundance, and the steady rhythms of the seasons. The age of Aries tested the fires of the human spirit. It brought conquest, courage, and the will to carve new paths, but also the danger of mistaking dominance for destiny. Pisces wrapped the tale in veils of faith, compassion, and devotion, yet hid a shadow, the temptation to surrender sovereignty to an authority outside oneself. And now, Aquarius begins a new stanza, a flood of awakening where truth no longer lives in temples alone, but in the shared air between us. The ancients did not see these as disconnected eras. The Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, implies that the turning of the great wheel was always meant to mirror the soul's journey from ignorance to remembrance. The Maya, the Egyptians, and the Vedic seers all understood that time itself was not linear, but cyclical, and that each age carried the necessary lesson for the one that followed. In this way, the story was designed to be impossible to rush. You cannot skip chapters without losing the plot. Perhaps this is why the transitions between ages are so turbulent. They are not simply the changing of scenery, they are initiations. Old patterns collapse, not to punish, but to prepare. And humanity, like a hero in the midst of the tale, often resists the next chapter until the turning of the page is inevitable. Seen this way, history is not random. It is a curriculum. The ages are the syllabus. and the soul of humanity is the student. Every joy, every loss, every empire, and every fall was part of a greater architecture, a narrative moving toward a singular revelation. And though we do not yet know the ending, the rhythm of the cosmos assures us each age was placed exactly where it must be, so that by the final page, the soul will remember it was the author all along. The shift between ages is never quiet. It is not a gentle sunset giving way to dawn. It is a thunderclap at the edge of the sky, a tide pulling the shore into unfamiliar shapes. Every transition is marked by signs, some written in the heavens, others whispered in the undercurrent of human affairs. The ancients called these liminal times thresholds, spaces where the old has not yet died and the new has not yet fully arrived. And it is in this space between that the hidden code of the cosmos reveals itself. Astrologically, these shifts align with the precession of the equinoxes, a slow, deliberate movement of Earth's axis that ushers the sun's rising point into a new constellation roughly every 2,160 years. To the untrained eye, it is an imperceptible drift, but to those who watch the sky with reverence, it was a celestial heartbeat, counting down to a change in the world's spiritual climate. The Egyptians saw it in the way certain temple alignments no longer matched the sunrise. The Vedic sages encoded it in yuga cycles. The Maya wove it into their long count calendar. Yet the code was never purely astronomical. The heavens might set the clock, but the earth answered with upheaval. In the final centuries of one age, we see the cracks appear. In empires, in religions, in the stories people tell about reality. Trade routes shift, borders dissolve, languages blend or die. New technologies emerge not simply as tools, but as harbingers of new thought. Old gods lose their worshippers. New symbols begin to rise in art, in dreams, in the quiet prayers of the forgotten. This is why these times often feel chaotic. The old systems sense their ending and cling harder. Their defenders amplify fear to keep the collective anchored in what is already dissolving. But beneath the noise, something else is speaking. Subtle at first, then undeniable. We feel it as synchronicity. We see it in the way truths, once buried, surface everywhere at once. And often, we experience it as personal upheaval. Careers ending, relationships shifting, identities dissolving. As if the universe is pruning what cannot pass through the doorway of the new age. In the esoteric traditions, this is not collapse for its own sake. It is initiation. The friction between the old and the new generates the spark required for transformation. It is the alchemical fire that turns the base metal of our collective consciousness into something more refined. Without the chaos, there would be no awakening, only a slow drift deeper into sleep. So the hidden code of transition is not simply a prophecy to decode. It is an invitation to read the signs in your own life and the world around you, to see which structures are crumbling, and to ask not only what is ending, but what is calling to be born. For in every shift between ages, the cosmos leaves a map, not to preserve the past, but to guide us toward the chapter we were always meant to write next. There has never been a time in human history when the cosmic code, the map of ages, the understanding of their rhythms and transitions, was freely given to all. From the moment it was first read in the stars, there were those who recognized its power and moved swiftly to contain it. Not all suppression was born from malice. Some came from a belief that humanity was not ready, that certain truths would cause disorder if revealed too soon. But much of it was calculated, an act of control, a way to keep the masses untethered from the deeper cycles that govern their destinies. In ancient empires, this knowledge was guarded by priestly classes. The temples of Egypt, Babylon, and later Rome were not just places of worship. They were cosmic observatories. Within their walls, astronomer priests recorded the slow movement of the equinoxes, charted the rise and fall of constellations, and understood how each shift heralded a change in the soul of the world. But these records were not placed in the hands of farmers, merchants, or common laborers. They were hidden in coded myths, sealed in stone alignments, or locked behind oaths of secrecy. When conquest swept through civilizations, this wisdom was often the first casualty. The library of Alexandria's fires consumed scrolls that may have held entire treatises on the ages. Mesopotamian star charts were plundered and lost to time. In the Andes, the Spanish systematically destroyed the quipus and oral traditions that tracked celestial cycles, replacing them with calendars aligned to Christian festivals rather than the turning of the stars. Even when fragments of the code survived, they were reframed to serve new powers. Mythologies were altered, symbols reinterpreted, and prophecies bent to fit political agendas. The bull of Taurus became a sacrificial image rather than a cosmic emblem of fertility and stability. The twin motif of Gemini was reduced to playful allegory, stripped of its deeper meaning about duality and exchange. Each age's essence was diluted, its shadow and light recast in narratives that kept people looking down at the soil rather than up at the heavens. With the rise of organized religion, suppression took on a theological edge. Teachings about the ages threatened the monopoly of sacred authority. If people knew that spiritual truths evolved with cosmic cycles, that even divine law moved in seasons, then no institution could claim absolute permanence. The solution was to brand such knowledge as heretical, occult, or demonic. The Inquisition did not burn only bodies. It burned the maps that might have guided those bodies through the labyrinth of time. Yet suppression is never perfect. The code persists in fragments, in the architecture of temples, in symbols carved into megaliths, in myths whose metaphors still match the stars. It lives in the work of Renaissance astronomers who risked their lives to publish what they saw. It whispers through the words of mystics, poets, and wanderers who caught glimpses of the pattern and carried it forward in riddles and dreams. For every attempt to erase it, the code adapts. It hides in plain sight, waiting for the moment when eyes are ready to see and ears are ready to hear. Because no matter how deeply it is buried, the stars still turn, and their truth will not remain silent forever. There have always been those who refused to let the map be lost. When the tides of empires shifted, when temples fell and libraries burned, a different kind of archive endured, one carried not in books but in bloodlines, and in symbols so layered that only the initiated could read them. These were the guardians of the blueprint. They were not kings, though they sometimes advised them. They were not priests of the state, though they often spoke the language of the sacred. They were the keepers of a current older than any single civilization, a current that flowed from the stars, through human memory, and into the hidden chambers of the soul. In Egypt, this current ran through the priesthoods of Heliopolis and Memphis, where the rites of Osiris and Thoth concealed astronomical codes beneath layers of myth. The Great Pyramid itself was more than a tomb. It was a geometric key, its angles echoing the precessional numbers that chart the ages. In Mesopotamia, the Magi preserved their knowledge in star maps etched onto clay tablets, some of which survive in museums today, still whispering the mathematics of cosmic time. In Greece, The Orphic and Eleusinian mysteries cloaked the same truths in initiatory drama, where descent into darkness and return to light mirrored the cycle of an age's death and rebirth. These lineages worked like living vaults. The knowledge was never written in its entirety. It was passed from teacher to student, encrypted in allegory, song, architecture, and art. A single carved spiral might speak of the precession of the equinoxes. A carefully chosen animal in a temple relief might signal the age in which the building was consecrated. To the untrained eye, these were mere decorations. To the initiated, they were coordinates in a cosmic map. During the rise of monotheistic empires, these guardians faced a choice: conceal or perish. Many took refuge in secrecy, forming esoteric orders such as the Pythagoreans, the Sufi brotherhoods, and later the Rosicrucians and Freemasons. Their temples were now meeting halls. Their altars became lecture tables. Their prayers were coded oaths. They moved silently through history, hidden in plain sight. The symbols they carried were not random. The compass and square, the Vesica Pisces, the all-seeing eye. These were remnants of the blueprint, fragments of the grand design that marked the turning of ages. To preserve them was to ensure that, when the time was right, humanity could remember. But they knew memory alone was not enough. Each age has its own challenges, and the Guardians understood that the blueprint was not a fixed prophecy, but a living guide. It required interpretation, adaptation, and the courage to see beyond the illusions of the moment. This was their true task, not to hoard the knowledge, but to tend it like an eternal flame, until the day when the collective was ready to receive it without fear or distortion. And so, scattered across continents and centuries, they kept the watch. In cathedrals and desert caves, in the margins of manuscripts and the patterns of stained glass, the blueprint survived, waiting, sleeping, listening for the signal that the next turning of the wheel had come. The sky has always been more than a canvas of distant lights. It is a clock, a storyteller, a living library whose language is geometry, rhythm, and light. Long before ink touched parchment, before temples were raised in stone, the ancients watched the heavens with a patience we can scarcely imagine. They noticed that the stars did not merely wander at random. They moved with purpose, slow, deliberate, in patterns so vast that a single cycle could span the rise and fall of empires. This was the code in the stars. Among the most important of these patterns was the Great Precessional Drift, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that causes the backdrop of constellations to shift over thousands of years. Around every 2,160 years, the point of the spring equinox aligns with a new constellation, marking the beginning of a new age. To the ancients, this was not coincidence. It was the heartbeat of cosmic time. Each age brought its own qualities, challenges, and lessons, written in the language of the stars and mirrored in the fate of nations. The Egyptians aligned their temples with precision to the rising of Sirius, whose heliacal rising signaled the flooding of the Nile and the renewal of life. The temples of Karnak and Luxor were not only centers of worship, they were astronomical instruments, keeping track of the slow turning of the heavens. In Mesopotamia, the Chaldean astronomer priests charted the movement of planets against the constellations, noting alignments that coincided with the birth of kings, the fall of cities, and the start of new dynasties. The Mayans across the ocean constructed observatories like El Caracol at Chichen Itza to follow Venus, whose cycles they tied to prophecy and the turning of eras. The markers were subtle, yet undeniable. a rare triple conjunction of planets might herald a shift in spiritual leadership. The darkening of an eclipse in a specific zodiacal sign could be read as the closing of one cosmic chapter and the opening of another. Even the slow drift of the equinox point from Taurus to Aries to Pisces, each transition became mythologized in sacred stories. The slaying of the bull, the rise of the ram, the fisher of men. These were not seen as mechanical events, but as divine correspondences. As above, so below. When the heavens shifted, the earthly stage did too. Religions transformed, empires rose or crumbled. Consciousness itself took on a new shape. Today, astronomers still measure the precession with mathematical precision. But for most, the symbolism is forgotten. Yet the code remains in the sky, as it always has. The constellations are still turning. The alignments still whisper. And those who know how to read them can sense when the wheel is about to click into a new position. We are not separate from this dance. We are part of it. Each of us a point of light moving within a larger pattern, woven into the same celestial fabric that has marked the ages for tens of thousands of years. And the stars are telling us another turning is near. They stand like frozen prayers, stone bodies etched with symbols, aligned not to chance but to the heavens. Across the world, civilizations that never knew each other built monuments that speak the same hidden language, a language of light, shadow, and cosmic time. These structures were not merely built for worship or display. They were time capsules, anchors for the great celestial clock. The Great Pyramid of Giza is perhaps the most famous of these. To the casual eye, it is a tomb, but to the initiated, it is a map, locked in stone, of the earth, the heavens, and the cycles that govern them. Its sides are aligned with astonishing accuracy to the cardinal directions, and its internal shafts point to key stars such as Orion's belt and Sirius, marking celestial events tied to the old ages. The pyramid's proportions encode mathematical constants, pi, the golden ratio, and even the dimensions of the earth itself, suggesting its builders understood that sacred architecture must mirror cosmic order. Travel east and you find the temples of Angkor Wat in Cambodia, whose towers rise in a lotus pattern reflecting not only the Hindu cosmology of Mount Meru, but also the movement of Venus and the Sun through the year. Its galleries trace celestial alignments in bas relief, the stories of gods and heroes carved alongside the unfolding of cosmic time. In the Americas, the Temple of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza is designed so that twice a year, during the equinoxes, the setting sun casts a serpent of light and shadow slithering down its northern staircase, a celestial event tied to the agricultural calendar and to the passing of the ages in Mayan thought. The city of Teotihuacan in Mexico, with its avenue of the dead and pyramids of the sun and moon, was laid out to align with the Pleiades star cluster, the same cluster sacred to ancient Egyptians, Greeks, and Mari navigators across the Pacific. Even in the cathedrals of medieval Europe, echoes of the old code remain. Rose windows align with solstice light. Towers and transepts mirror constellations, and sacred geometry is woven into their floor plans. These architects inherited fragments of knowledge from earlier ages, embedding cosmic principles into Christian forms, hiding the old code in plain sight. The alignment was never arbitrary. These monuments were built to endure beyond the lifespan of kingdoms, so that when all else was forgotten, their geometry would still whisper to the sky. They carried forward the knowledge that each age has its beginning, its zenith, and its decline, and that these phases can be read in the heavens if you know where to look. Today, tourists stand in their shadow, cameras in hand, often unaware that these stones are speaking. They speak not in our hurried tongue, but in a language of centuries. They remind us that the ages are not abstractions. They are measured, marked, and memorialized in the bones of the earth itself. And those who read the code can still hear it, waiting for the next great turning. They say myths are just stories, but the elders knew better. Beneath the dragons, the floods, the dying and rising gods, there is a map, a record of the sky's great rhythm, hidden in the folds of allegory. Every culture, separated by oceans and millennia, told tales that carried the same invisible skeleton, the turning of the cosmic wheel. In ancient Egypt, the tale of Osiris's death and resurrection was not only a morality play about kingship and justice, it was a mirror of the sun's descent into the underworld and its rebirth, a cycle tied to celestial procession. Osiris's dismemberment into 14 parts reflected the lunar cycle, while his restoration by Isis hinted at the renewal of life at the dawn of a new age. The Greeks spoke of the Titan Kronos, who devoured his children to prevent them from overthrowing him, only to be replaced by his son Zeus. To the uninitiated, it's a tale of cruelty and rebellion. But to those versed in the mysteries, it symbolized the devouring of one age by the next, the old order giving way to the new as the stars shifted in their eternal dance. In the Vedic tradition, the yugas, vast epochs of light and darkness, are described as both moral and cosmic states. Satya Yuga, the age of truth, is followed by progressively darker ages until the cycle resets. The lengths of these yugas correspond to astronomical cycles that echo the precession of the equinoxes, woven into the verses of the Mahabharata and the Puranas. The Hopi tell of 4 worlds that humanity has passed through, each destroyed by flood, fire, or ice. The transition from one world to another is marked by celestial signs and upheavals on earth. Their prophecies describe a time when the blue star Kachina will appear in the heavens, signaling the end of the current world, a metaphor that may point to a visible celestial event marking the turning of an age. Even the Book of Revelation, often read as a purely theological vision, bears the fingerprints of the cosmic code. The imagery of the lamb, the lion, the dragon, and the woman clothed with the sun overlays astrological symbolism. The lamb is the ram of Aries, the lion of Leo, the dragon the serpent constellations, all playing their roles in a prophecy tied to celestial alignments. These were not coincidences, nor were they primitive attempts to explain the weather. They were encrypted transmissions designed to survive the rise and fall of languages, empires, and dogmas. The myths carried forward the memory of past turnings and the warnings of those yet to come. To the untrained eye, they remain fables, but to the seeker who listens, who notices when the serpent in one culture coils around the same cosmic tree as in another, or when the flood comes at the same stars rising, the pattern emerges. The ages speak in story, because story is the only vessel that can sail across thousands of years without sinking. And somewhere in those stories, the next chapter waits to be read. They say the stars turn above us, but the real shift is happening within. As the ages move, so too does something deep in our biology, not in the slow crawl of ordinary evolution, but in the subtle retuning of the very code that builds us. Mystics have whispered for centuries that the human body is not a static vessel. It is a living archive, and its script, the DNA, carries instructions not just for flesh and bone, but for the unfolding of consciousness itself. Ancient traditions hinted at this in symbolic language. In the Vedas, the serpent Kundalini, coiled at the base of the spine, mirrors the double helix's spiral. When awakened, it rises through the chakras, activating higher states of awareness. Hermetic texts spoke of the seed of the divine implanted in humanity, a latent blueprint that unfolds as the great cosmic clock advances. In the Kabbalah, the tree of life is not only a map of the universe, but also a mirror of the body's inner circuitry, an architecture that evolves in step with the heavens. Modern science has found intriguing parallels. Epigenetics reveals that genes are not fixed sentences, but living paragraphs that can be edited by environment, experience, even thought patterns. The dance of methyl groups and histones, silencing or activating genes, mirrors what mystics have always said, that the inner and outer worlds are in conversation. And if the position of the planets affects the tides and the growth of seeds, why would the intricate waters of the human body, 70% of which moves in rhythm with the moon, be exempt from the greater cycles? The shift between ages is not just marked by social upheaval or planetary alignments. It is a transmission, a change in the frequency bathing our world. As the sun's position in the precessional cycle moves, Earth is exposed to different streams of cosmic radiation, subtly altering the electromagnetic environment. Some physicists speculate that these changes could affect biological systems at a molecular level, including DNA's quantum vibrational states. To the mystic, this is not speculation. It is the very mechanism by which the new human is born. Myth and prophecy preserve this truth. The Hopi speak of the return of the true white brother and a purification that will leave only those aligned with the heart. The Andean Quero talk of the emergence of Homo luminous, a human whose energy field is expanded, luminous, and resilient. Even Revelation hints at a moment when the book of life will be opened. Perhaps not a celestial ledger, but the awakening of the book written in our cells. The DNA is not just memory, it is prophecy. And in this turning of the ages, every cell listens for the signal. Some will resist, others will adapt, and a few, perhaps you, will hear it as a call to rise, to remember, and to step into the form you were always meant to become. There is a moment when the hidden strands of truth, buried under centuries of dust, distortion, and denial, begin to hum again. At first, it is faint, like a low vibration at the edge of perception, felt more than heard. Some sense it in their dreams, others in sudden shifts of intuition, in strange coincidences that begin to stack with impossible precision. This is the code awakening, not in a laboratory or a temple, but in the living network of human consciousness itself. Individually, it can feel disorienting. Old certainties unravel, careers, relationships, and identities built on inherited stories begin to crack. It is not destruction for its own sake. It is a pruning, a clearing of dead branches, so the light can reach what is still alive within you. Mystics across traditions describe this as the dark night of the soul, a necessary disassembly before reassembly. Epigenetics gives us a biological parallel. Stress and upheaval can trigger dormant genes, forcing adaptation. In this sense, the chaos is not a sign of failure, but of reconfiguration. Collectively, the process is equally dramatic. Systems built on concealment falter when the concealed truth starts to leak. We see it in the collapse of trust in old institutions, political, religious, economic, and the parallel rise of decentralized networks where knowledge bypasses traditional gatekeepers. It mirrors the transition between cosmic ages, when the prevailing myths of one era are dismantled and a new symbolic language emerges. Just as the Renaissance erupted after the medieval age, fueled by rediscovered texts and the printing press, our time is seeing a renaissance of its own. Only now the library is global and the shelves are digital. But the return of the code is not just information. It carries a frequency, a pattern that reorganizes what it touches. Indigenous traditions understood this well. The Maori speak of Mori, the life force that infuses all things, which can be strengthened or diminished by the truth we live. The Dogon of Mali preserved complex astronomical knowledge for centuries, encoded in ritual because they knew timing was everything. A truth released before its season can burn rather than illuminate. That is why the code often reappears in fragments through art, myth, and symbolism, until the collective is ready to hold it whole. When the awakening accelerates, something remarkable happens. Individuals begin to synchronize without coordination. Ideas emerge in different places, almost simultaneously, as if drawn from the same invisible well. Historians call this multiple discovery. Mystics call it the collective mind opening a new page. The barriers between personal and planetary awakening dissolve. Your insight becomes part of humanity's upgrade. And here is the paradox. The code has never truly been gone. It has lived in our blood, our stories, our stones, waiting for the alignment when we would hear it again. Now, as the ages turn, it is rising like a tide, and whether you meet it with resistance or with reverence will shape not only your own destiny, but the direction of the whole human story. The age we are leaving does not fade quietly into history. It dissolves like a tide pulling away from the shore, taking with it the sands upon which we once stood. For over 2 millennia, the age of Pisces carried humanity through the waters of faith, sacrifice, and surrender. It was an age ruled by the symbol of the fish, where currents of belief moved through the collective like unseen rivers. We learned the power of devotion, the beauty of compassion, and the humility of service. But these gifts did not come without their shadows. The same faith that could heal also bound many in chains of blind obedience. Compassion, when twisted, became martyrdom without balance, and surrender sometimes drifted into passivity, waiting for salvation rather than embodying it. Now, as the celestial clock shifts, the lessons of Pisces are being sealed. Karmic patterns that began long before our own births are finding their resolution. In every heart, there is a quiet recognition of certain cycles ending. Relationships, ways of thinking, even entire worldviews that once felt eternal are now dissolving like salt in water. This is not the universe's cruelty. It is its kindness. For if the old patterns do not close, the new ones cannot open. In the Piscean age, power was often centralized. In churches, in monarchies, in institutions claiming to speak for the divine. But as the last waves of this era recede, the illusions of authority are cracking. Many are experiencing a kind of spiritual unmasking, seeing that the hierarchies they trusted were always human constructs, not eternal truths. And with that recognition comes grief, but also liberation. The karmic debts of collective illusion are being repaid, not in punishment, but in awakening. Individually, the end of an age feels like an unraveling. We are being asked to examine the ways we gave our inner compass away, to confront where we followed tradition over truth. Old emotional contracts, often written in the language of guilt or fear, are surfacing so they can be dissolved. This is the work of closing an epoch, not clinging to the raft that carried us across one ocean, but stepping onto the shore of the next. Yet the closing of an age is not a rejection of its gifts. The compassion cultivated in Pisces is the bridge we will carry forward into Aquarius. The capacity for deep empathy, the understanding that the soul's journey is one of service to something greater. These remain as the distilled essence of what we have learned. What changes is the vessel in which those truths will travel. No longer confined to the walls of a temple or the words of a single doctrine, the wisdom of Pisces is preparing to flow freely, like water finding every crevice of the human heart. And so, as one constellation lowers its crown and another rises to the horizon, we stand in the in-between. The karmic knots are loosening, the spiritual contracts are being rewritten, and the great current of time whispers to each of us, "Release your grip, for the river knows its own way." The age of Aquarius rises like a dawn that has been foretold in whispers across centuries. It comes not as a single moment, but as a gradual illumination, an unfolding wave of awareness that begins within the human heart and spreads outward to reshape the world. Its emblem, the water bearer, is not about water in the literal sense, but about the pouring forth of knowledge, truth, and the living waters of consciousness to all. Unlike the centralized hierarchical currents of Pisces, Aquarius is the era of decentralization, where no single voice claims ownership of truth, and where wisdom flows freely, unbound by the gates that once held it captive. The mission of this new age is both grand and intimate. On the collective level, it calls for the dismantling of the rigid systems that have kept humanity divided, political, economic, and even spiritual frameworks built on scarcity and control. It asks us to co-create a civilization based on cooperation rather than competition, transparency rather than secrecy, and shared stewardship rather than dominion. On the personal level, it calls for sovereignty, each soul becoming its own bridge to the divine, no longer outsourcing spiritual authority to external powers. This is an age that invites you to remember that you are not a follower of truth. You are a carrier of it. The gifts of Aquarius are luminous. It brings the potential for unprecedented technological innovation aligned with human well-being, the expansion of global consciousness through instant communication, and the rise of communities that are connected not by proximity, but by resonance of spirit. It offers the gift of the collective mind, a shared intelligence where ideas and inspiration flow between individuals as if we are neurons in the same cosmic brain. And in its highest expression, it carries the energy of humanitarianism, of recognizing the sacred in every being, and designing systems that honor life in all its forms. Yet, as with every age, these gifts are shadowed by challenges. Aquarius rules technology and networks, but without wisdom, these same tools can deepen division, amplify illusion, and erode the very humanity they were meant to serve. The decentralization of truth also means the multiplication of falsehoods. Discernment becomes a spiritual necessity. The focus on collective identity can risk diluting the individual voice, while the pursuit of equality can be twisted into uniformity that suppresses the diversity it seeks to protect. We are entering an era where old maps no longer work. The structures that once held meaning are dissolving, and the path forward will not be handed to us. It must be built in real time, through collaboration, through trial and refinement. The sky itself reflects the transition, as the slow procession of the equinox moves us from the stars of Pisces into the outstretched hands of the water bearer. This is not a change we witness from a distance. It is a tide we are meant to move with. And so, the question is not whether the age of Aquarius will come. It is already here. The question is how awake we will be when its light fully arrives. The shift between ages is not only written in the stars or etched into the architecture of civilizations. It is inscribed within you. Every great cosmic turning is mirrored by an intimate turning inside the human spirit. As the collective moves from one vibrational field to another, the individual is invited, sometimes gently, sometimes violently, to shed the inner skin that belongs to the age we are leaving. It begins subtly, with questions you cannot unask, a quiet dissatisfaction with the stories you've been told, a pull towards something that feels both ancient and new, like a memory surfacing from the depths. The transformation of personal consciousness during such a shift is rarely comfortable. It is the unraveling of identities carefully woven over lifetimes, the loosening of beliefs that once gave you stability. What is leaving is not merely outdated thought. It is the psychic architecture of the previous age, built into your emotional reflexes, your spiritual instincts, your ways of relating to others. This unraveling is necessary, for the truths that belong to the new age cannot live within the old scaffolding. Like a seed, you cannot stretch into new light while clinging to the husk that once protected you. Such transformation unfolds in layers. First comes awareness, recognizing the ways in which your current worldview no longer fits. Then comes release, the surrender of attachments, roles, and even dreams that cannot pass through the doorway of the new vibration. Finally comes alignment, discovering how your energy, your actions, and your purpose harmonize with the field that is emerging. It is here that many experience the awakening of dormant capacities, heightened intuition, deeper empathy, and a magnetic pull toward communities of resonance. The shift within is not a solitary event. Just as the heavens move in concert, so too do the transformations of countless souls create a collective field that amplifies each individual's growth. This shared current makes the process both easier and more intense. Easier because you will find mirrors in others who are walking the same path. More intense because the collective shedding stirs up shadows not only in yourself, but in humanity as a whole. It is tempting to think of this inner shift as something to be achieved quickly, as if one could simply step from one age into another overnight. But the truth is slower and more organic. The cosmic transition itself spans decades, even centuries, and your personal evolution follows its own rhythm within that arc. What matters is not speed, but depth. The willingness to meet the unknown without rushing to fill it with the familiar. The change of ages calls you to be both witness and participant, to allow yourself to be reshaped, even when the old patterns cling like vines, to trust that the unease, the loss, and the strange exhilaration you feel are all signs that the inner landscape is aligning with the greater turning. For when the age shifts within you, the age itself truly arrives. The outer rhythms of the cosmos are not distant, impersonal events. They are the great mirrors in which the soul sees itself. Every precessional shift, every alignment of planets, every slow turning of an age is not merely a celestial phenomenon. It is a reflection of a deeper movement already unfolding within the human spirit. This is why ancient cultures studied the skies with such devotion. They knew that the heavens were not separate from the inner world, but its grandest expression. What rises in the constellations is an echo of what stirs in the collective soul. In this way, the transition of ages is more than an astronomical measurement. It is a story the universe tells about your own becoming. The great wheel of the zodiac turns, and as it does, the inner landscape is rearranged to match. The age of Pisces, with its themes of faith, sacrifice and devotion, required souls to cultivate trust in unseen realities. Now, as the wheel turns to Aquarius, the lesson shifts toward awakening, decentralization of truth, and the liberation of the individual spirit. This external shift is simply a grand mirror of the internal passage from reliance on external saviors to the discovery of inner sovereignty. When the ancients carved stone temples to align with solstices or charted the slow drift of stars across millennia, they were not only keeping astronomical records, they were holding up mirrors. Each precise alignment was a reminder, as above, so below, as without, so within. The sky was a sacred teacher, a cosmic text in which every human life could find its reflection. Even now, if you gaze upward during a planetary conjunction or stand beneath the arc of a meteor shower, something in you responds, not merely to the beauty of the event, but to the recognition that you are part of the same choreography. This mirroring is not always gentle. Outer cycles often reflect the inner work most in need of attention. And just as a personal awakening can bring both clarity and upheaval, so too can the larger cycles of history. Economic collapses, cultural revolutions, the rise and fall of empires, all are collective reflections of the soul's shadow and light in motion. The turbulence of the outer world is a call to witness the turbulence within and to bring it into balance. When you understand this connection, you begin to live with a deeper trust in the patterns. You stop seeing cosmic shifts as random events or as omens to fear, and instead recognize them as synchronized invitations to grow. The heavens speak not in words, but in timing. And every great change above is an affirmation that change is meant to happen within you too. For in truth, the outer sky has always been your own reflection, vast, luminous, and waiting for you to see yourself in it. Long before humanity began tracking the slow procession of the equinoxes, before the names Pisces and Aquarius were spoken in temple corridors, there were whispers of a pattern far grander than the ages themselves. This greater rhythm, spanning tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of years, was seen by some as the heartbeat of the cosmos. To those who perceived it, the familiar zodiacal wheel was only a single ring within a much vaster design, a smaller wave riding atop an ocean of cycles. Ancient astronomers in Egypt, India, and Mesoamerica hinted at it in myth and number, embedding clues in sacred calendars that stretched into epochs beyond the reach of recorded history. The Vedic concept of the yugas spoke of immense arcs of time in which humanity rises to spiritual brilliance and falls into deep forgetfulness, cycling through Satya, Treta, Dvapara, and Kali Yuga. The Mayans, through their long count calendar, charted spans of more than 5,000 years, yet even that was said to be only one gear in a larger cosmic machinery. In the records of the Dogon people of Mali, the sacred star Sirius was not just a celestial neighbor, but a clock, marking immense cycles tied to the rhythms of creation itself. Across continents, the message was the same. The ages we know are fragments, and their turning is part of a greater spiral, vast and unbroken. When the ancients built their monuments, aligning them not just to solstices or precessional markers, but to star positions that would only return after tens of millennia, they were not simply measuring seasons. They were recording the pulse of this deeper cycle. The Great Pyramid's orientation, the temples at Angkor Wat, and even the enigmatic stones of Göbekli Tepe seemed to carry alignments, pointing to a celestial choreography older than our civilizations. perhaps older than our myths. Such constructions suggest that there were once eyes among us who could see beyond the horizon of history, attuned to the pattern that governs the rise and fall of ages themselves. This grand cycle, according to esoteric traditions, is not impersonal. It mirrors the breath of a greater being, the inhalation and exhalation of a cosmic intelligence in whose body our galaxies are but cells. Within this perspective, humanity's journey is not an isolated path, but part of a universal unfolding, where civilizations bloom like flowers in spring and dissolve like leaves in autumn, only to return again, refined, transformed, more luminous with each return. If the ages are chapters in the story of humanity's soul, this greater cycle is the book itself, its pages written in the language of light and shadow, ascent and descent. To recognize this is to understand that what we are living through now is not merely a shift from one sign to another, but a movement that ripples through far deeper waters. The turning of the ages is the drumbeat you can hear. The greater pattern is the silence between the beats, the space in which the song of creation breathes. When the last breaths of one world give way to the first heartbeat of another, prophecy often becomes the bridge between them. Across civilizations, from the jungles of the Yucatan to the Himalayan peaks, seers, sages, and mystics spoke of a time when the great wheel of time would turn, ending an age and beginning another. The Maya called it the close of the 13th Baktun, a 5,125-year cycle in their long count calendar, culminating in December 2012. While popular culture misread it as an apocalypse, their glyphs and codices hint at something far more subtle and profound: a renewal, the rebirth of the sun, and the resetting of cosmic order. In the Vedic tradition, this vision takes the form of the Yuga cycle, immense epochs that rise and fall like the breathing of the cosmos. The Kali Yuga, often described as the age of darkness and materialism, was said to be drawing toward its close, preparing for the dawn of the Satya Yuga, the age of truth. This transition, like the Mayan prophecy, was not imagined as a single date, but as a gradual unweaving of the old fabric, thread by thread, until the loom stands ready for new patterns. Ancient Sanskrit texts, such as the Vishnu Purana, speak of signs that herald this shift: corruption exposed, the collapse of false rulers, a growing hunger for spiritual truth. In the West, echoes of this same archetype appear in the Sibylline oracles and in the cryptic visions of the Book of Revelation, where the new heaven and new earth emerge after great trials. The Hopi elders speak of the arrival of the fifth world, preceded by a time when the earth is shaken, rivers change course, and humanity stands at a choice point, either walking the path of harmony or facing the cleansing fire. These prophecies, though clothed in different myths, point toward a common recognition that endings and beginnings are not separate events, but phases in the same divine rhythm. To those living through such a passage, the signs can feel like both blessings and burdens. Upheavals unsettle the structures we depend upon. Revelations strip away illusions we have carried for lifetimes. But in the language of prophecy, this is the necessary labor before birth. The storms are midwives, the chaos is the contraction, and the light on the horizon is the child about to open its eyes. If you listen closely, these ancient visions are not warnings to fear, but invitations to awaken. They remind us that the shift is not only planetary, it is personal. Each of us is asked to release the patterns of the age now fading and to carry forward only what serves life, truth, and love. In this way, prophecy becomes not prediction, but preparation. Not a fixed script, but a sacred mirror in which we may see ourselves choosing the path toward the world now being born. There has always been a war for the code. Not a war fought with armies alone, but one waged in shadows, through censorship, infiltration, and the slow rewriting of memory. This code is the blueprint of how reality is shaped, a synthesis of cosmic law, sacred geometry, and the knowledge of cycles that governs both the heavens and the human spirit. In the hands of those who honor life, it becomes a key to liberation. In the hands of those who seek dominion, it becomes a weapon. That is why, throughout history, empires, priesthoods, and secret orders have sought either to monopolize it or to bury it so deeply that generations would forget it ever existed. In ancient Alexandria, scrolls that mapped the stars and the soul's journey were burned under the guise of order and purification, their wisdom absorbed by select scholars who served the empire. In Mesoamerica, the arrival of the conquistadors brought not just swords, but bonfires where codices, intricate books encoding celestial rhythms, were turned to ash. These acts were not random, they were strategic. If humanity could no longer track the turning of the great ages, it would become easier to convince them that history is linear, that their fate is fixed, and that only sanctioned intermediaries hold the truth. Control of the code means control of perception. When the masses forget the pattern, they can be made to believe that wars are isolated, that collapses are accidents, that rulers are chosen by chance. But those who guard the code know that events are not random. They are ripples from larger cycles. To erase that understanding is to sever a people from their sense of destiny, leaving them adrift in a manufactured narrative. The war is also waged through distortion. Genuine prophecy becomes apocalyptic fear-mongering. Symbols that once spoke of unity are twisted into banners for division. Sacred architecture, aligned to solstices and stargates, is rebranded as mere superstition. Even modern science, when steered by hidden agendas, can be used to dismiss what cannot be measured, framing the code as myth instead of map. Why such effort? Because when the code awakens in collective consciousness, centralized control falters. People begin to see the artificial cycles imposed upon them and step outside of them. The illusion of separation begins to dissolve. This is the nightmare of those who profit from disconnection, whether they wear crowns, sit in boardrooms, or operate in unseen hierarchies. Yet, despite centuries of suppression, the code survives. It hides in symbols carved into stone, in myths passed as bedtime stories, in the quiet knowledge of those who dream in alignment with the stars. And now, in this turning of ages, it stirs again, not because the powers that guard it have grown careless, but because the rhythm of the cosmos itself demands that it rise. The war is far from over, but for the first time in millennia, the battlefield is not only above and around us, it is within. To restore the divine blueprint is to remember what was written before we were born. It is the act of reclaiming the original instructions embedded in the very fabric of life, a set of principles, patterns, and rhythms that align humanity with the greater harmony of the cosmos. This blueprint is not a rigid plan. It is a living map that shifts with the ages, guiding each generation to adapt without losing the truth at the core. When civilizations honored it, their cultures flourished in balance with the earth, the heavens, and each other. When it was forgotten, the center collapsed into chaos. Reclaiming it begins with recognition. For centuries, the code was scattered, hidden in temples, whispered in mystery schools, woven into myth. Each fragment alone seemed incomplete, but together they form the lattice of a complete vision. Sacred geometry reveals how life organizes itself. Astrology charts the timing of the ages. Ancient texts, whether the Vedas, the Hermetica, or the Mayan codices, encode the spiritual laws that govern transformation. The restoration is an act of weaving, bringing together the strands that have been severed and allowing them to hum again in unison. It also requires purification, not in the sense of moral judgment, but in clearing the distortions layered over the truth. Systems of control have reshaped the code to serve their own ends, turning liberation into obedience, cycles into prisons, and symbols into tools of fear. Restoring the blueprint means discerning what is authentic from what is imposed. It is the work of peeling back centuries of manipulation until the original resonance can be felt again, clear, unbroken, undeniable. This restoration is not just a collective effort, it is deeply personal. The divine blueprint exists within the architecture of our own being, encoded in the body, reflected in the mind, and awakened through the soul. Every act of self-alignment, every choice to live in harmony with truth, becomes a thread in the larger tapestry. In this way, personal awakening is not separate from planetary transformation. It is the very engine that drives it. On a collective scale, restoring the blueprint will redefine our structures. It will reshape how we educate, how we govern, how we exchange value, and how we heal. Imagine systems designed not for exploitation, but for the flourishing of all beings. Imagine cities built according to sacred proportion, where form and function are inseparable from beauty and meaning. Imagine science and spirituality no longer at war, but working together to decode the same mystery. This is the potential that re-emerges when the code is whole. And yet, restoration is not a return to the past. The blueprint is timeless, but the way we embody it evolves. Each age calls for a new expression of the same eternal truths. In the age of Aquarius, this expression will be marked by decentralization, shared knowledge, and the recognition that each soul is both student and teacher. The blueprint does not demand blind following. It invites conscious co-creation. And in answering that invitation, humanity steps back into the river of its destiny, not as wanderers lost in forgetting, but as architects of a future aligned with the stars. To live in alignment with the ages is to become an instrument that plays in harmony with the music of the cosmos. It is not merely a concept to understand. It is a way of being, where every thought, action, and relationship reflects the frequency of the era you inhabit. The transition into the age of Aquarius calls for a shift from passively existing in the rhythms of the old world to actively embodying the codes of the new. This embodiment begins with awareness, deepened by practice, and sustained through daily choices. Awareness comes first. It means recognizing that the cycles of the heavens are not distant or abstract, but intimately woven into your own life. When the sun, moon, and planets align in certain patterns, they create resonances that ripple through consciousness, shaping collective moods, values, and priorities. To live in alignment is to notice these shifts, to mark solstices and equinoxes, to be aware of planetary transits, to feel the tides of cosmic influence as tangibly as the changing seasons. Ancient cultures lived by this awareness, and so must we, though adapted to modern life. From awareness flows intention. The age of Aquarius brings the energy of collaboration, innovation, and truth unveiled. This means practicing transparency in relationships, seeking decentralized solutions rather than hierarchical control, and honoring the sovereignty of every individual. It calls for a life that values knowledge not as a weapon of power, but as a light freely shared. The practical embodiment might look like participating in communities where ideas are exchanged openly, or cultivating skills that contribute to the collective good, whether in healing, technology, education, or the arts. Living in alignment also means practicing resonance on the personal level. Your body is not separate from the cosmic field. It is a tuning fork for the age's frequency. Practices like breathwork, meditation, qigong, and sound healing can help fine-tune this resonance. The foods you eat, the environments you inhabit, and even the words you speak all shape your vibrational field. In an Aquarian era, this tuning is not about rigid perfection, but about congruence, ensuring that your inner state and your outward actions are in harmony. Another key is adaptability. Every age brings both gifts and challenges, and alignment means flowing with the gifts while meeting the challenges consciously. In Aquarius, the challenges will often come in the form of over-reliance on technology, detachment from the body, or the temptation to replace spiritual depth with intellectual abstraction. To stay aligned, anchor your connection to the earth while embracing the innovations of the sky. Let technology serve consciousness, not replace it. Finally, living in alignment requires trust. The great cycles are far larger than any single life, yet each soul has chosen this moment for a reason. Trust that your role, whether visible or hidden, is essential to the unfolding. When you live with awareness, intention, resonance, adaptability, and trust, you do not simply witness the age of Aquarius, you become its living expression. In doing so, you join the chorus of countless souls awakening to the same truth. The stars are not dictating your fate. They are inviting you to dance in step with the eternal rhythm. The greatest revelation of all is this: the code you have been seeking, hidden in temples, etched into myths, woven through prophecies, encrypted in the stars, was never separate from you. From the very beginning, it has been humming quietly in the architecture of your being. Every heartbeat, every breath, every spark of thought is an expression of that same cosmic pattern. You are not just a student of the code, you are its living continuation. This is why ancient initiations did not simply transfer knowledge, they awakened recognition. The priest in Egypt, the sage in India, the druid beneath the oak, they did not create the truth for their students. They uncovered what was already there. They spoke in symbols, in paradox, in riddles, because they knew that the moment of true understanding would not come from hearing the words, but from feeling them resonate inside like a note that had been waiting to be struck. Your DNA itself carries this legacy. Modern science has revealed that more than 98% of what was once dismissed as junk DNA may hold complex regulatory functions, possibly even storing dormant capabilities. Mystics have long claimed that this hidden DNA is a biological archive of the soul's journey, its turning of the ages, its inherited wisdom, its encoded mission. When you align your life with the greater cycles, you are not learning something foreign. You are activating what has been silently present since before your birth. This is why the pull towards certain symbols, numbers, or places can feel so unexplainably strong. It is the code recognizing itself. The spiral in a seashell, the golden ratio in a leaf, the precession of the equinoxes in the sky. These are mirrors, showing you the same patterns that live in your cells. The more you see them outside, the more they awaken within. To live knowing this changes everything. It dissolves the illusion of separation between self and cosmos. You begin to understand that the shift of ages is not merely a celestial event happening light years away. It is a flowering inside you, a new arrangement of energy and awareness, the prophecies of renewal, the visions of awakening, the whispers of a golden era. They are not waiting for some future moment to arrive. They are waiting for you to claim them as your present reality. And here is the final key. Once you realize you are the code, you also realize you are the code bearer. You are responsible for how it unfolds from here. Every choice you make, every word you speak, every act of love or fear sends a ripple into the larger design. The ages do not dictate the outcome, they open the door. It is humanity, and each soul within it, that decides how the next chapter is written. So as the new era dawns, do not stand outside it, looking in. Step forward as part of its architecture. Let the rhythm of the ages move through you. Let the memory of what you truly are rise to the surface. For in the end, the greatest secret ever kept is also the simplest truth. The code is not just written in the stars, it is written in you. And so, if these words have stirred something ancient within you, don't let the feeling fade. Let it guide you deeper. There's a path here, threaded through the ages, that we are walking together. And every step you take with us will awaken another piece of that code inside you. So before you go, stay connected to this journey. Watch our other videos. Each one is another doorway, another key, another revelation. If what you've heard tonight resonated, subscribe to the Hidden Voyage so you never miss the moments that change everything. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Share your insights, your questions, your own awakenings, because when we speak them aloud, they ripple across the whole field. Share this video with those who are ready to remember. And if it touched your soul, give it a like, so more seekers can find it. The ages are shifting, and you are part of the awakening. We'll meet again in the next chapter of the voyage. Welcome to the Hidden Voyage. Welcome home, Soul Whisper and Soul Creator, the Hidden Voyage.